what has been happening in Israel? Well, there have been six Israeli hostages that have been killed. And now Israelis are turning on Netanyahu. They are actually protesting against him. Now, let's not get this twisted. They're not protesting because they want a necessary ceasefire. They want this to end. They still want Hamas to go. Okay. But they are willing to accept a ceasefire for now to get the hostages home. So they are angry with Netanyahu because they have found out, or it has been brought to their attention, that he basically has been in the way, and he is the one that has been stopping this from moving forward to getting those hostages to return home. So now, the chickens have come home to roost. Shout out to Hotspot for this video. Clashes between police officers and demonstrators at a protest here in Tel Aviv. Yeah, so long story short there, the protesters are not happy. They want the hostages to come home, and they're starting to take that frustration out on Netanyahu. And you'll also see here, there is a cousin of one of the Israeli hostages. Now, he was on CNN, and I want you to hear what he said. He's also angry at Netanyahu, and you can see the little headline here at the bottom. It says, Netanyahu is asking for forgiveness after 6 hostages have been killed. Listen to this.
We knew that he was going to use it for his media circus, that he's going to go with his media circus and say that he apologized to us. So we didn't want to be a part of this horrible charade. He is going to use the murder of my cousin in order to keep the war going, and this is exactly it. I'm furious. It's exactly what he does. It's his responsibility that they were killed. He could have saved them, and if he just chose what most of the Israelis wanted.
Apologies about his sound, guys. I don't know what he was doing there.
Hostages die in captivity. This is exactly what's going to happen. And Hamas is a terror organization. We blame him for the killing, the execution of the hostages, of course. But on the other side, I want to see a nation that believes in life, and not another politician who believes that he can use death as a weapon. And the death of civilian hostages.
Yeah, so CNN's audio wasn't that great. But long story short, as you can see, he feels as though Netanyahu is using the hostages as an excuse to continue to obviously bomb people in Gaza. And I mean, he's not wrong. He is doing that. But notice again, I don't want you to hear this and think, oh, all of a sudden they're okay with it. They totally understand why Hamas did what they did. No. Like, again, he still condemns Hamas and their actions, but he also is now, they're angry at Netanyahu because, to his point, when he said that now that these 6 hostages have been killed, now that is another reason that Netanyahu is going to use as an excuse to continue to drop bombs on Gaza. And if that happens, that means obviously that does put the other hostages in immense amount of danger, which is why when the other hostages that were released, that's why they said the only way that you're going to get the rest of them back is if we have a ceasefire. That is what you are going to need to do. Now, Netanyahu doesn't like this. He's pretty angry that his people are mad at him. And it was only a matter of time that this was going to happen. So I want you to hear a little bit of a speech here.
I was asked whether I'm not doing enough to the release of hostages. Well, I want to set the record straight. On April 27th, Secretary of State Blinken said that Israel made an extraordinarily generous offer for a hostage deal. On May 31st, Israel agreed to a US-backed proposal. Hamas refused. On August 16th, Israel agreed to what the United States defined as a final bridging proposal. Hamas refused again. On August 19th, Secretary Blinken said, Israel accepted the US proposal. Now Hamas must do the same. On August 28th, that's 5 days ago, Deputy CIA Director said that Israel shows seriousness in the negotiations. Now Hamas must show the same seriousness. I want to ask you something. What has changed in the last 5 days? What has changed? One thing. These murderers executed 6 of our hostages. They shot them in the back of the head. That's what's changed. And now after this, we're asked to show seriousness? We're asked to make concessions? What message does this send Hamas? It says, kill more hostages, murder more hostages, you'll get more concessions. The pressure internationally must be directed at these killers, at Hamas, not at Israel. We say yes, they say no all the time, but they also murdered these people. And now we need maximum pressure on Hamas. I don't believe that either President Biden or anyone serious about achieving peace and achieving the release would seriously ask Israel to make these concessions. We've already made them. Hamas has to make the concession. Thank you very much. Toda rabba lachem.
So he's upset because his people are now mad at him, because let's be real, this has been going on for quite some time. Now, obviously, he told some lies there. And one of them that I do want to point out, he wants to talk about who agreed to a ceasefire and who didn't agree to a ceasefire. I want to take you back to this article here from the Times of Israel. I said, read this. This is how you know the Biden administration has been lying all along. And I put the link in the thread below, but this is the part I want to focus on here. We later found out that Hamas had offered on October 9th or 10th to release all civilian hostages in exchange for the IDF not entering the Strip, but the government rejected the offer. I want to say this one more time, peoples. This was day 207. We later found out that Hamas had offered on October 9th or October 10th to release all civilian hostages in exchange for the IDF not entering the Strip, but the government rejected the offer. Why is this important? This is important because it goes to show you, as many times as Netanyahu wants to talk about Hamas not accepting the offer, the very first offer, which happened on October 9th, October 10th-ish, Hamas accepted. It was Israel that did not accept the offer. So as I've said from day one, if the number one priority was the hostages, they would have accepted that offer and they would have had them back. Now you'll see here, Kamala Harris, today POTUS and I met with U.S. hostage deal negotiation team. The murder of Hirsch Goldberg, Poland, and 5 other hostages was a brutal, barbaric act by Hamas terrorists. As POTUS said, Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes. So you know what that means, right? That means they're going to give Israel more weapons. That means they're going to kill more people. It is long past time for a ceasefire and hostage deal. We need to bring the hostages home and end the suffering in Gaza. But you know what she does not say? You see the picture here, right? You know what she does not say? What she leaves out, which I think is important. She doesn't tell you what I just told you. In fact, not once has the Biden administration said that Hamas accepted the deal, but Israel did not. In fact, they've been telling you the exact opposite since October 7th, because their job is to protect Israel, because that's who they are paid to protect. So you see how they spin this? None of them are showing you the article that I just showed you. Now, Ro Khanna, he decided to discuss this on Meet the Press. So we're going to give a big shout out here to Case Study QB. And I want you to hear what Ro Khanna has to say.
Thank you so much for being here. I have to start with this just devastating and tragic news. The revelation that 6 hostages have been killed by Hamas, including Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland. What is your reaction, and what do you think this will mean for hostage negotiations?
Well, my heart breaks for the family of Hirsch Goldberg Poland. I met, like many, his parents, John and Rachel. He was a Californian. They spoke about his love for life. He was planning to go to India. He was planning to travel the world, and it's just a devastating loss, his murder by Hamas. But what we need now is an end to the war, and we need to continue to pressure Hamas to unconditionally release the hostages. But the hostage families themselves are saying that Netanyahu needs to actually be in the negotiation. Gallant, his own defense minister, has criticized Netanyahu in the cabinet for saying that the Fidelfi corridor, that Netanyahu is not willing to withdraw troops there, as Egypt and the United States want. So I hope there's going to be pressure on Hamas and Netanyahu to end this war, release the hostages.
Let me ask you big picture about.
So again, Hirsch, this was an American Israeli that was killed.
Something. This is according to the Washington Post, which says that Vice President Harris would conduct a full review, if elected, of the U.S.-Israel policy and could be open to imposing conditions on some aid to Israel. I know that that's something that you have supported. Have you been pushing her directly to support conditioned aid to Israel?
Now, do you see what they're trying to do here? Now they're trying to flip this. Now, we just saw what Kamala Harris said on the interview, that she wasn't willing to condition aid or stop any weapons to Israel. Now, all of a sudden, Meet the Press, they are saying that Kamala Harris is now, if I'm elected, I may be open if elected. If she can't even commit to it now, what makes you think she'll commit to it if she wins? She doesn't have to serve a second term, guys. All she has to do is serve this one term, and she can say she did her thing. And the Democratic Party can say, well, we had our 2 consecutive terms, different leader, but we had our 2 consecutive terms. And so now if the Republicans want to go and take this one in 2028, it is what it is. So it's not like she has to get reelected. Do you see what I'm saying? So listen to what Ro Khanna says. Have you been pushing her?
I've been pushing her to support the enforcement of U.S. law. That is what the enforcement of the Leahy law and our security laws require, that we don't have unconditional aid. And, Kristen, this isn't unprecedented. In 1982, after the Sabra and Shatila massacres in Lebanon, President Reagan called up Menachem Begin in Israel and said, we will not give aid in a way that's going to cause humanitarian crises.
So he has to bring up Ronald Reagan refusing to give aid and weapons to Israel. Ronald Reagan, who was a conservative, he has to bring up what Ronald Reagan did just to show you guys that Kamala Harris is not even progressive, is not progressive on this issue. And I wouldn't even consider what Ronald Reagan did at that time to be progressive, but that tells you Kamala Harris, when it comes to the weapons and aid to Israel, she's to the right of Ronald Reagan on that. Even Ronald Reagan wasn't willing to just continue to give them the weapons. Ronald Reagan picked up the phone and said, you have to stop. Too many people have died. Look it up for yourself. So this is terrible. Terrible, right? Ro Khanna tells you that I'm pushing her to follow the law. She was a prosecutor. She knows the law. You know, as much as she wanted to lock up people, now all of a sudden she's not willing to follow the law because it involves Israel. Now, I'm glad he framed it the way that he did. I'm pushing her to follow the law. Because we all know that's something she's really big on, right? Like the law and justice and I'm locking up criminals and all that jazz. We know that's her thing. She's a cop. But she's not willing to follow the law. Not for herself.
We need to have pressure on both sides to end the war, and I'm glad the vice president's open to a new direction.
Has she expressed openness, though, to conditioning aid to you directly in some of your conversations?
No, I will leave that for the vice president to articulate, but what she has.
No. You see how he slipped that in there, said no, but what she has.
Her team has expressed openness is to a new direction. And look, anyone looking at this policy, you have hostages who still aren't released. You have a war that has lasted almost 11 months. You have over 40,000 people in Gaza dying. We need a new direction of policy to bring the war to an end.
Let me ask you about another foreign policy issue. You just heard Senator Cotton there sharply critical of the Biden administration, of President Biden and Vice President Harris for the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Vice President
just wanted to stop there with the Israel part and then they get into Afghanistan. But there's Ro Khanna doing what he has to do because he probably wants to run for president in 2028, especially considering, well, this if Kamala Harris wins, then maybe he won't. But this is something else that they're not bringing up. But I think in the future, he wants to run for president. This is something else that they're not mentioning. Everyone's talking about the hostages that were killed. But shout out to Ali because they're not mentioning this. Among the 70 Palestinian children, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the Democrats have assisted Israel to murder in the occupied West Bank so far this year. 2 are U.S. citizens. Have you heard that reported in any U.S. media? Nope. And here it is right here. Israeli forces and settlers have killed 70 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank in 2024, including 2 U.S. citizens. 2 U.S. citizens. But you haven't heard Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, any of them mention the 2 Americans that were killed in the West Bank. Why is that? Because they're Palestinian. Netanyahu is right here. Just openly. Shout out to Asal Rod. Thank you for this. It is wild that Netanyahu openly uses a map that erases the whole West Bank with little or no coverage or pushback from the West. The erasure of the West Bank is part of the same genocidal campaign as Gaza, a total assault on Palestinian existence made possible with U.S. support. So you can see here his future map. The West Bank, which would be over here, is gone. And here's Gaza. And this is the plan to force all of them into Gaza. And nobody's saying anything. Is Kamala Harris saying anything about this? No. Is she saying anything about the West Bank? No. None of them. Donald Trump isn't saying anything about this either. And if he were to, he's going to side with Israel. None of them, they're pretending like this is not even happening. We are watching ethnic genocide and displacement of an entire population of people in real time. And the majority of our politicians are silent or they're complicit. The majority are not willing to stand up. The majority are not willing to push back. And so we have to start asking ourselves some real questions. What does the future of politics look like in the United States when it comes to foreign policy? And how much longer are we going to continue to support these parties that continue to fund and aid genocide, that continue to extract resources or steal resources from other countries, that continue to kill people in these countries that refuse to go along with Western propaganda? How long are we going to continue to support these parties? Because when it comes to Israel, both parties support Israel. And even the Democratic Party, which complains as much as they want about the Republican Party and loves to put the fear into people about Donald Trump, Netanyahu is to the right of Donald Trump. And they're giving him money and they're giving him weapons What does that tell you about the Democratic Party? We need to have a serious discussion in this country about what this is going to look like in the future, because it is only a matter of time. I don't even know how much longer Israel can continue to do this. Like, I really don't. Just because now other Israelis, they are turning on Netanyahu. So I don't even know how much longer this keeps up before they storm his house. Such a mess. All of this could have been prevented. All of this could have been prevented had the government taken that deal the week of October 9th, and the hostages would have been returned.